Giorno Giovanna, a young man with two daddies. And no, I don't mean that. Receiving the golden locks from Dio and the wit of a Joestar, it is all translated wonderfully into figure format. But is it worth the price point? The sculpt on this figure is great, and the paint is the coup de grace. The semi-shiny gold paint on the trimming of the jacket looks great in contrast with the matted black paint on the figure. Although I will say, tiny bits of gold paint seem to be chipped on the jacket. Not a big deal. But moving on, the dry brushing on the hair really brings the hair to life by giving it depth and makes the hair look layered. And in short, it's just a handsome son of a bitch. But it takes more than looks to win this pageant. What are the accessories like? Comes with two open palm hands, fist hands. You get two hands to make it look like he's tugging on his jacket, but both the sculpt is slightly different, so I could be wrong. I know at least one of these hands is to make that pose where he's tugging on his jacket. You get a cupping hand, which you can use to hold accessories with, and one of those accessories is the lighter. And the flame on the lighter actually looks quite nice. Get a teacup holding hand as well as the teacup accessory. And by the way, I'm gonna put a picture up, but there is tea in the cup. And lastly, well, not lastly, but almost lastly, you get a plate accessory, which you see him holding. You get a bread accessory, and inside the bread accessory, there's a hole that you could place the lighter in. Because, you know, if you watch part 5 of JoJo, there's a scene with that. But very nice accessories, I have to say. One more thing. This ladybug button accessory, I don't know exactly what you would call it. And last but not least, you get a screaming head, which is done pretty well, if I must say. Head looks down that far, head looks up that far, head swivels, and you get a slight pivot. Arm rotates 360, but it goes at an angle. Double jointed elbow, wrist hinge, and wrist swivel. Crunches forward, not very far. Leans back decently. Swivel at the diaphragm, and also another swivel at the waist. Legs split about that far, so not very far at all. Leg kicks forward pretty far. Kicks back decently far. Thigh swivel. Double jointed knee. Ankle rocker. Ankle hinge. And toe hinge. Okay, so kicking off the striker pose segment with Giorno, we have the first picture of him pulling on his jacket. And this was probably the easiest pose to pull off. There's certain things that, you know, it's not the same as the illustration here by Araki, like his hair. And, you know, alternative head sculpt would have been nice for that. But overall, this was a pretty successful striker pose. I think that, you know, I added my own little extra pizzazz to it, and that's something that you're gonna see throughout this particular segment with Giorno, because I was inspired by Araki's more colorful and vibrant art style when I was editing these pictures. So yeah, for this first one, successful. This second one right here is probably the most successful out of all of them. It was a little tricky getting this pose because that side tilt could have been better in a diaphragm joint, but overall, and also it's kind of Araki's perspective and anatomy was a little tricky. Like he was breaking some rules, I think, with it. So it became a bit tricky trying to get the pose to look exactly like the picture. But overall, a success. What can I say? And moving on to the third picture, this one I took a lot of creative liberties with because one, I didn't have that chair, but I did have a chair, and two, that chair is not even sitting flush on the ground in the illustration. It's like tilted. And three, it's not like I said before. I added my own extra flair to it to make the pictures, you know, more fun to view as I talk through them with you guys. But overall, I wish the head pivot articulation was better so I could get that attitude that Giorno is showing in the picture. But other than that, I would say probably the least successful in terms of replicating the illustration. But it is one of the nicer pictures. And last but not least, I freestyled the last picture because I just I think this figure is kind of limited in its articulation. No, you probably would have seen by now in, you know, the articulation segment, whatever. But I think a lot of basic, mundane poses like sitting down, you can get him to do certain things. I think the biggest weakness for this figure is the hips and the core, and those are two big things if you want dynamic poses. Now, for the most part, if you really play with him, you can get him into close enough poses. But I wish that core and I wish those hips were better. Um, but other than that, did okay with the striker pose. This is probably the ironically these came pictures came out the best, but it did the worst I think in all the striker poses um that I've done so far. Maybe a bit worse than even Xeno Super Saiyan 4 Goku. But yeah, I think what it makes up for it makes up what it lacks in articulation. It makes up for in its pure aesthetic of the figure. So there's that. For Giorno's height, he stands about 5 3/4 inches tall. Here he is next to Jolyne. He is next to Naruto. He is next to Goku. Next to Spider-Man. But not least, Gold Experience. And should you pick this figure up? I would say that is a resounding yes. Because what this figure lacks in articulation, which is okay, it makes up for in pure aesthetic. This looks like an adult collectible. This looks like something you're proud to have on your shelf. And if you're a JoJo fan, definitely pick this guy up. In fact, I'll put like a price somewhere on the screen that I seen. And I seen like it went from like $90 to $75. Like I said, I'll put it somewhere up on the screen. But yeah, definitely pick this guy up. Paint looks good. Like it feels like something you proud to have, you know? But with that being said, I wish one thing. I'll say a couple more things. I think they made him a bit thin. They could have stood. He's a skinny character, but I don't know if his waist just tapers that much. I think they kind of exaggerated how skinny he was, going down to his waist. But also, it would have been nice to have another swappable head with his hair like blowing in the wind. And I think I seen some variation of that head sculpt floating around on the internet, but maybe that comes with a different version of Giorno. But either way, that being said, until next time, this has been Bombastic Plastic. Stay fantastic.